All right, so for this AI Daily Deep Dive, get this. The whole thing, the research and all the content was generated entirely by AI. Pretty wild, right? Today we're going to dive into the top AI news from, let's see, Wednesday, April 9th, 2025. A lot of interesting stuff happening.
Yeah, quite a few big stories really show where AI is heading. We're going to look at this new brain-to-speech tech, how teens are using AI. Then there's the whole autonomous AI agent thing, the debate about using AI for resumes, and then, oh, and the EU's plan for AI infrastructure. That's a big one.
Okay, so first up is a brain-to-speech AI. This is from UC Berkeley and UCSF. This is really interesting. Basically, it's supposed to help people who have trouble speaking.
Yeah, people who can't speak because of, paralysis or some neurological condition. Like imagine their brain is forming the words, but they just can't get them out. This tech basically translates their brain activity into synthesized speech.
Wow. Okay. So technically, how does that even work?
So they put this array of electrodes on the speech motor cortex. That's the part of the brain that controls your mouth and vocal cords. So these electrodes pick up the signals, the neural activity, when someone tries to speak. Then they have this really advanced AI algorithm that's trained to, match those brain patterns with specific sounds. And get this, they can even make the synthesized speech sound like the person's own voice. They use pre-recorded samples.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I mean, I've heard about these brain-to-speech systems before, but they were always kind of clunky, right? What's different about this one?
Right. The old ones had a big lag. They had to process a lot of information before they could produce speech. This new one, though, it works in super short intervals, 80 milliseconds, so it's practically real time, much closer to how we actually talk.
It's pretty close to natural conversation speed, too, right? It said something like 90 words per minute.
Yeah, and normal conversation is usually between 100 and 130 words per minute. So 90 is a huge improvement, makes it so much more natural sounding.
Okay, but I have to ask, I mean, this thing is reading your brain signals, right?
Mm-hmm.
What about privacy? Could it accidentally blurt out what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's a really good point. The researchers were really aware of that. The system is actually designed to tell the difference between when you're actually trying to speak and when you're just, thinking random thoughts. So no accidental outbursts, hopefully.
Mhm.
And in their tests, it was super accurate. No false positives, even when people were just resting for 16 minutes. They even built in a thing that adapts over time to get better at recognizing when someone is actually trying to communicate.
That's good to hear. So when can we expect to see this actually helping people?
Well, the biggest thing is those electrodes, they have to be implanted, which is invasive. So wider adoption is still a ways off. But the researchers are hopeful that it could be used clinically in the next 3 to 5 years. And for people with really severe speech impairments, it could even be sooner, like 1 or 2 years.
Wow, that would be incredible. And I bet this tech could be used for other things too, not just helping people with disabilities.
Oh, absolutely. They're already talking about using it for things like, interacting with virtual assistants. Imagine controlling your devices with your mind. And they're also looking at what they call closed loop AI, so the system actually learns and adapts along with the user.
Well, that's kind of sci-fi, but cool. Okay, so let's move on. There was this survey about how teenagers are using AI from UC Irvine and Foundry10.
Yeah, this was interesting. They surveyed over 1,500 teens aged 9 to 17. There's this worry that teens are just going to use AI to cheat, but it turns out that's not really the case. A big chunk of them, 69%, said they used AI to actually learn new things.
That's a relief. So were there a lot of problems with their parents or teachers because of their AI use?
Surprisingly, no, not really. Only less than 6% of them said they had disagreements with people about using AI. They seem to like ChatGPT and stuff like that, mostly for creative stuff and homework, but not so much the mental health chatbots, at least not this age group.
Okay, interesting. So where are they using AI the most? At school?
Actually, it seems like most of it's happening at home. Something like 72% use it for entertainment at home and 63% for homework. Only about 40% said they use it for actual classwork at school. And this is funny, the parents are way more hesitant. Less than a quarter of them said they use AI as a family.
Interesting. Different generations, I guess. The survey also looked at whether kids from different backgrounds are using AI equally, right?
Yeah, and this could be really important. Sometimes with new tech, it's only the wealthy kids who have access. But it looks like with AI, it's pretty much the same across all socioeconomic backgrounds. Professor Hayes, one of the researchers, thinks this could make AI a really powerful tool for education, maybe even help close the achievement gap.
I hope so. But we have to talk about the downsides too, right? Especially for kids using AI.
Of course. AI can definitely help personalize learning and make kids more engaged, but they also have to learn how to think critically. Like with these AI generators, they can spit out stuff that's just wrong or biased. So kids need to be able to tell the good from the bad. And the researchers want to see more research and policies around AI in education, hopefully with help from the National Science Foundation.
That makes sense. So overall, it's a bit more optimistic than some people might think. Teens are actually using AI to learn and be creative. Okay, so next up, autonomous AI agents. Why are some people saying we need a whole new kind of game theory to understand them?
This is getting into some really advanced stuff. We're not talking about chatbots anymore. These are agents that can act on their own in the real world and the digital world. There's this guy, Zico Coulter. He's a professor at CMU and on the board at OpenAI. He's doing a lot of research on how secure these AI models actually are.
Right, and his lab is doing this thing called jailbreaking AI, right?
Yeah.
What is that exactly?
So they're basically trying to hack the AI to figure out its weaknesses. By finding those vulnerabilities, they can then, build AI that's more secure, less likely to be attacked. They're trying to build in security from the very beginning. And this kind of research needs a ton of computing power. So CMU has partnered up with Google to get access to their resources.
So these AI agents can actually do stuff on their own. What are some of the risks there? I mean, in the real world?
Coulter says, look, forget about those Terminator scenarios. There are real dangers right now. Like these agents could get access to sensitive data or even mess with systems in the real world without anyone telling them to. And he says all our usual security stuff, it's just not designed for this. It's like those buffer overflow exploits, where you feed a program too much info and it just goes haywire.
And it gets even crazier when you have multiple agents interacting with each other, right?
Exactly. When you have all these AI agents running around, each with their own goals, you can't really predict what they'll do. And traditional game theory, that was all about how humans make decisions. It doesn't really work for AI.
So that's what Coulter is saying. We need a new kind of game theory for AI.
Yeah, something that accounts for how agents interact with each other and with humans. And with AI getting more and more powerful, he thinks this is getting pretty urgent. Like, they've already shown how easy it is to trick these agents into leaking private data.
It does seem like we're at a turning point. We need to be smart about safety and security as AI gets more advanced. Okay, let's switch gears again. What about using AI to write resumes and cover letters? People are pretty divided on that.
Definitely a hot topic. So Kathleen Nolan, she's a recruiter at Growth Loop. She's been doing this for years. Her take is, it's fine. In fact, everyone's doing it, and it can actually be helpful.
She literally said everyone uses AI for things like this. Why does she think that?
Basically, she says AI is already everywhere in our work lives, so why not use it for resumes too? AI tools can help you write something that's well organized, grammatically correct, and maybe even more effective. And she thinks most recruiters know it's happening anyway.
Okay, but she does have some tips for people who are going to use AI, right?
Absolutely. She says, don't just let the AI write the whole thing. You have to give it good instructions, like tell it to optimize your resume for a specific job or to focus on your achievements.
Right, so garbage in, garbage out. What else?
She says you got to really look at what the AI spits out and make it your own. Edit out the repetitive stuff, make sure the language sounds like you, and double-check all the facts. And, this is interesting, she says, to take out the AI prompts you used.
It should still look professional. So she doesn't seem too bothered by the ethical arguments against AI resumes.
Not really. She kind of thinks it's hypocritical. Like everyone's using AI for other stuff, so why not this? She says, as long as you're being honest about your qualifications, it's fine. And she thinks if you use AI well, no one will even be able to tell.
Okay, but what about tailoring your resume to each job? Doesn't that take a lot of time?
She actually advises against spending hours customizing every single resume. She says, have a few good versions that you can tweak a bit depending on the job. And for cover letters, she still thinks they're valuable, but maybe not for big companies. If you have time, write a short, focused one.
And what about exaggerating your qualifications with AI? Is that okay?
She's very clear on this. Do not lie. The point is to present yourself well, not to make stuff up. Be honest and use AI carefully. That's her message.
Sounds like she's got a pretty practical view. AI can be a tool, just use it responsibly. All right, last but not least, the EU is building these AI gigafactories. That sounds massive.
Yeah, it's huge. They're putting 20 billion euros into it. The goal is to get Europe up to speed with the US and China in AI. They want to make Europe the AI continent, basically.
20 billion is a lot of money. What will these gigafactories actually do?
So they're going to be these big centers for developing cutting-edge AI models. They're talking about moonshot innovations in science, robotics, biotech, all kinds of stuff. And they'll be much bigger than anything Europe has now, way more processing power. They want to have over 100,000 AI processors compared to the current biggest sites, which only have about 25,000.
That's a huge difference. What kind of infrastructure are we talking about?
Well, think supercomputers, massive data centers, and of course that raises questions about energy use and water. The EU says they want to use renewable energy as much as possible and recycle water to minimize the environmental impact.
That's good, but I know some environmental groups are worried about data centers in general.
Yeah, Greenpeace and others have said these gigafactories could hurt Europe's climate goals. They point to places like Ireland, where data centers already use a ton of electricity.
Okay, so how are they going to pay for all this?
Each gigafactory is going to cost somewhere between 3 and 5 billion euros. It's going to be a mix of public and private investment. They're also going to be working with the European Investment Bank. And one cool thing is they want to make their own AI chips in Europe, which are obviously crucial for these facilities.
It definitely sounds like the EU is serious about catching up in AI. They even mentioned a Stanford report that highlighted how far behind Europe is.
Yeah, that report from 2024 was pretty eye-opening. It showed that the U.S. is way ahead in terms of developing new AI models, and Europe wasn't even in the top 5 in overall AI vibrancy, so that probably pushed the EU to take action.
And there's talk of changing the EU's AI Act, right? What's that about?
Yeah, the AI Act is their big law for regulating AI based on how risky it is. They're thinking about making some changes, mostly to make things easier for businesses, especially smaller ones. But some people are worried that this will make AI less safe and make people trust it less. The EU says they're still committed to regulating AI based on risk, and they're trying to find the right balance between safety and innovation.
It sounds like a tough balancing act. Big ambitions, environmental concerns, money issues, and then all the regulatory stuff.
It is, but if they can pull it off, these gigafactories could be a game changer for Europe. They could become a global center for AI, develop their own tech, and make some major breakthroughs.
All right, so that wraps up our deep dive into the top AI news for today. We covered a lot, from this incredible brain-to-speech technology to teens using AI in unexpected ways, to the whole autonomous AI agent thing, which is pretty mind-blowing, and then, of course, how people are using AI for their resumes and the EU's big plans. It's all happening so fast.
It really is. And it's amazing how all these seemingly different things are connected. They're all part of this big story of how AI is changing our lives. It makes you wonder what the long-term impact will be, what will stick around, what will change everything. It's really exciting.